This right here is the MiniSForum UN1250. It's a mini PC that does pack some serious power for its size and price. But instead of using this as a mini PC, I have been using this as my mini home server. In this video, I'm going to show you how the MiniSForum UN1250 seamlessly integrates into my Homelab by taking over workloads that require that extra computing power with using less power overall. I will also show you how to set up Proxmox and several virtual machines and even set up a TrueNas for the Home NAS server. So feel free to use chapters as this is probably my longest video ever. Alright, it's time to level up my Homelab. As you saw in my previous video, I have been running the Beelink S13 Mini. It's fantastic for running as a media server using Jellyfin, and it's also great for running Docker containers. But honestly, I was hitting a wall when it came to running more powerful virtual machines. I mean, what do you expect from an Intel 150 chip? So here's the plan. I want to build a mini home server that can handle a wide range of workloads. One of the key components will be running a multiple virtual machine. In addition to that, I will be setting up Docker containers to run tools like a Homelab dashboard, a Notion like a document management system, and even a VPN system using WireGuard VPN. And yes, I will also be setting up TrueNas to run my Home NAS server. And that's where the MiniSForum PC comes in. It's packed with serious performance power using 12-core, 16-thread Intel i5-1250P processor. For full disclosure, I received this mini PC for a review, which I made up here. And since then, this PC was mainly collecting dust. So I thought maybe it's time to use this PC and level up my Homelab. Now let's talk about specs. We have got a solid 16 gigabytes of RAM, but to kick things up a notch and handle multiple virtual machines, I'm going to upgrade the RAM to 64 gigabytes. By the way, you can find the link to everything in the description below, so do check that out. Now, this mini PC doesn't officially support multiple NVMe SSDs, and this is a big letdown in my opinion, but it does offer one additional SATA drive. So for installing Proxmox, I will be using the 1TB NVMe SSD, which comes with my device. Plus, I'm going to add one additional SATA SSD for additional storage that I might use in the future. As for the rest of the specs, we have got two USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports in the front, which run at 10 gigabits per second. This is where I will be attaching my DAS or direct attached storage. And in the back, we have two additional USB 2.0 ports. On top of that, there are one HDMI, one USB-C, and one DisplayPort 1.4. And lastly, it has Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2 for fast wireless connectivity. For the NAS storage, I'm using a dual bay external enclosure by CentMate. It comes with multiple modes like RAID 0, JBOD, and RAID 1. Now this is an external USB enclosure that uses USB 3.2, working at total of 10 gigabits per second. For this setup, I'm also using two 4TB Western Digital RED drives, and I will be using this in single mode since I will be using a software RAID with TrueNas. Alright, so now it's time to install an operating system. There are many options to choose from, like there are multiple hypervisors that you can use for your Homelab. Since I'm planning to run Ubuntu, Windows, and Windows Server virtual machines, I'm going with Proxmox. Now, setting up Proxmox is actually simple and straightforward. Just head over to Proxmox website and download the ISO. Next, we need a bootable flash drive that we can install Proxmox on the mini PC. I'm using something called Balena Etcher for creating a bootable USB drive. Alright, now that we have our Proxmox installer flashed onto our USB drive, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this into the MiniSForum PC and then boot it up. And when the device is booting up, I'm gonna keep hitting the delete button so that the boot menu pops up. Otherwise, it might boot directly into the Windows operating system. Okay, now that we are in the BIOS, I'm gonna go into the boot options. And then I wanna boot from my USB drive so that I can run the Proxmox installer. So I'm gonna click on that and then hit a space bar once. and it should move my position to the very first. So that's what I want. I want this to be the first thing to boot from. Once I've done that, I'm gonna hit the back button, and it's asking me to save the configuration. Yes, I want to do that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and boot the device. Now you might have to reboot the machine one more time for it to run the Proxmox installer. All right, now we're in the Proxmox install page. I'm gonna choose the very first option, which is install Proxmox VE. And then the installer should start running, and then it might take a few seconds before we get to the install page. Now that we are at the install page, first thing you have to do is accept the agreement. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And next, I want to make sure that I install Proxmox onto the right drive or the correct drive. So in this case, I have two drives. One is my 500 gigabyte or 480 gigabyte of SSD. And then I have a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD. So that's where I want to install Proxmox. So I don't have to change anything, but in your case, you might have to choose the right drive. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Okay, next I'm gonna choose the time zone. So I'm in the central time zone, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Next, I wanna put a password in there. So just whatever password you want, go ahead and put that in there. And for email, just type in your email. All right, next I'm gonna hit next. Now, as long as you have your Ethernet cable plugged in, Proxmox should automatically assign an IP address and fill out this page. And if you don't have that, you might have to manually configure it. So in my case, everything is configured automatically. It has assigned Proxmox an IP address of 10.0.0.217. So that's going to be my default address. So I'm not going to touch anything here and continue. And then finally, we're at the summary page. So just review everything once and then hit install. Now, depending on your hardware, if you're using MiniSForum UN1250, it takes less than 2 minutes to install Proxmox. Okay, now that it's installed, you're gonna see a page where the system's gonna reboot, and you should use that IP address to log in from your Chrome browser or your desktop browser. Okay, that's it for the Proxmox install. Note that IP address that it's providing you, and then go ahead and reboot your device. And remember to unplug the USB drive, otherwise you'll be brought back to the installer page. Now I'm gonna go ahead and open up my Chrome browser and go to that 10.0.0.217 address, and then the port is 8006. All right, you're gonna be presented with this connection is not private. Don't worry, this is just a warning since we do not have a SSL certificate. So all you have to do is hit advance and then proceed. Even though it's unsafe, it's all running on our local system, so there's nothing wrong with that. Enter the username. It's always going to be root by default, and then for the password, whatever password you applied. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Now we have our Proxmox installed, and we can access it remotely. Now to just go over a few things, if I click on the summary page, I can see what I'm working with. So I have a total of 16 CPUs, and I have about 62.53 gigabytes of RAM, which is more than enough to run multiple virtual machines. As for the storage, I can go to disks, and I can see that I have one Kingston 1 terabyte NVMe SSD and one 480 gigabyte of Kingston SATA SSD. Now that we have Proxmox up and running, it's time to start planning what virtual machines I'm going to be running on my Homelab. For the Windows virtual machine, this will host a Microsoft SQL Server Developer Edition. And I'm assigning it 8 CPUs, 16 gigabytes of RAM. Then I have another Windows 10 virtual machine. This will be for general purposes, mainly for, remoting in and using it as my workstation. And to this, I'll be assigning 4 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM. For the Ubuntu virtual machine, this is what I'm mainly going to be using for running Docker containers. And I'm allocating about 4 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM to it. Finally, I have another virtual machine for running TrueNas Scale, which will act as my home NAS server. And to this, I'm assigning 6 CPUs and 12 gigabytes of RAM. Even after allocating all these resources, I'm still left with enough power to spin up future virtual machines in the future. All right, so to create our first virtual machines, first thing we have to do is download the ISOs. So since I'll be doing Ubuntu and I'll be doing Windows, I'm gonna go ahead and download those ISOs. And it's very simple to do that, and I'll link the links for the ISOs in the description below. So the way I like to download ISOs is just by Googling Windows 10 ISO download, and then go to Reddit. And then that's where they have shared the link directly to the page. And now I can select what version. So I want the Windows 10. I hit confirm. Language, I want to choose English, United States. You could choose whatever language is your preference, I guess. Okay, confirm that. And we should be brought to the installer. So by default, you're going to be, if you're using the MiniSForum PC, choose the 64-bit version. And if you hit download, it's going to start downloading that onto your local machine. But instead, what I'm going to do is copy this. So just right click, and I'm going to do copy link address. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my Proxmox and click on local PVE. And then it's automatically should take you to the ISO images. Now, if you have your ISO images downloaded, you can just hit upload, browse the file, and then upload it onto the Proxmox server. In my case, I don't have that, so I'm going to download from a URL. And then I'm just going to paste that URL. And then I'm going to click query the URL, and it automatically is going to go capture the name and everything for that. And now I can hit download. So now the ISO is directly getting downloaded onto the server rather than it would get downloaded on my MacBook Pro. Then I would have to upload it to the server. So I'm basically saving one step there. So just Google Ubuntu Server, and then you want to download the LTS, means long-term support version. So go ahead and download that. And then again, it's going to start downloading it directly onto the PC. I want to hit cancel there. And I want to copy the download now, copy the link address. So I have the URL, and I go back to my Proxmox, do the same thing, download from URL, paste my Ubuntu URL, and there we go. And then I hit download, and it's running, or it's downloading Windows and Ubuntu at the same time. So I can close these and wait for these processes to finish. So it looks like our Windows ISO download has finished. Refresh this by clicking out and clicking back on. So now we have Windows, and our Ubuntu is 30% done. So we'll give it a few seconds. All right, now that we have both of our ISOs downloaded, I'm gonna go ahead and create our first virtual machine. So in my case, I'm going to install a Windows 10 virtual machine. So to do that, you can click create virtual machine up here. So in my case, I'm going to call it SQL Server, since that's what I'll be using it for, and then hit next. The ISO image is going to be the Windows 10 version, and the type is going to be Microsoft Windows. Next, we're going to go, and it's going to automatically assign stuff, so we're fine without changing anything. And then for the EFI storage, I'm going to assign it the local VM. And for the TMP storage, I'm going to do the same thing, and then hit next. For the disks, I'm only going to give it 120 gigabytes, and then that 480 gigabytes of SanDisk that I have, I'm going to mount that onto this machine so that SQL Server can, have a lot more storage. All right, hit next for the CPUs. So now I have 16 cores. In this case, I am just going to assign it 8 cores, so half of that. And then the type is going to be, I like to use host. For the memory, I'm going to assign it 16 gigabytes. So 16134 should equal 16 gigabytes. Hit next. For the network, we're going to leave the default network, and then confirm. Okay, now we can see that 100 is our SQL Server. It's getting created, and then we should be ready to boot. So to start this machine, I'm going to click on console and then hit start now. And just like that, it should start booting into Windows. So we're at the install page. I'm going to hit next, install now. At this point, I'm not going to put in the product key. I can do that later. So I'm going to say I don't have a product key. And then I'm going to use Windows 10 Pro for my install. Hit next, accept, next, custom advanced, and then choose the 120 gigabyte of storage and hit next. And that's pretty much it. Now the Windows will get installed, run all the updates, do the whole 9 yards, and then we should be at the login screen pretty soon. Windows install took no more than 5 minutes, and then the device rebooted. Now we're at Alright, so the Windows install took no more than 5 minutes and the virtual machine rebooted. Now we're at the setup page. So to quickly run through the setup, I'm going to choose my country. So in my case, it's United States, hit yes, and then choose the keyboard layout, US. And then for now, I'm gonna skip the keyboard layout. All right, after this, it's gonna be running some updates, looks like, and configuring a few things here and there. So hang tight, I guess. All right, so now it's asking me to set this device up. So this is gonna be for personal use. Hit next. And then it's gonna ask me to sign in. So I'm gonna do an offline account. And then limited experience is fine by me. I'm gonna call this SQL admin for the username, and put a password in. Okay, next up is questions. So put in your secret questions, I guess. So now we're getting things ready for you, so it might take a while here. And that's it. Now it looks like we are done doing the setup for Windows. I'm gonna just close this. So I won't bore you with the SQL Server install, but I did manage to get SQL Server Developer Edition installed onto this virtual machine, and it's fully functional. It's housing a lot of the data that I've been collecting over the years, and it's running my content tracker that I use for the YouTube videos. So overall, everything is running pretty smoothly. All right, now that we have our first virtual machine done, for my second virtual machine, I'm going to be using another Windows 10. And then the idea there is to use my iPad to remote into that machine and do any kind of work that requires me to use a Windows workstation. So in this case, I'm going to do the same thing, create a virtual machine, and I'm going to give it a name. So this is going to be Windows WS. WS stands for workstation. So next, I'm going to choose the OS. So first thing I want to change is the type. So it's going to be Microsoft Windows. And for the image, I'm going to choose Windows 10 image. And then I'm going to hit next. And then define the EFI storage and the TMP storage. And hit next. For the storage, I'm only going to give it like 80 gigabytes because I'm going to have my NAS storage show up here. So any kind of bigger files, those will get stored on the NAS storage server. Okay, hit next. For the CPUs, I'm not going to give it as many like before. I'm just going to give it 4 CPUs. And then the type is going to be host. Okay, for the memory, I'm going to assign it about 8 gigabytes or 8192 megabytes. Hit next. And then no changes on the network page. Everything looks good here. And then confirm and finish. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go to console and start the virtual machine. And then boot from the DVD drive. And from here onwards, the install process will exactly be the same. All right, now it's time to install our Ubuntu server. So to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and create another virtual machine. And then this time I'm gonna call it Ubuntu Server. Okay, and hit next. And the type this time will remain Linux. The ISO is going to be the Ubuntu version. Hit next. Everything else looks fine. I am going to give it about 100 gigabytes of storage, mainly because I'll be running some Docker containers on here. So actually, I'll give it more. I'll give it like 128 gigabytes. And hit next. For the cores, I'll give it 8 cores of CPU. The type, I'm going to choose host. And then for RAM, I'll give it about 12 gigabytes. So network, we're going to leave everything default and confirm. And that's it. So we have our first Linux virtual machine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the machine. And to install Ubuntu, you got to click on try or install Ubuntu server. And it might take a few seconds before it gets to the install page. Okay, now that we're at the install, first thing I do is choose the language. In my case, it's English. Second, I'm gonna hit done. I don't want to touch with the keyboard layout. I want to install Ubuntu Server, so I'm gonna choose the very first option, hit done there. And then it's gonna automatically assign me an IP address. So in my case, it's done that. And here you can configure that however you want, but I'm fine with the IP address it gave me. I'm gonna hit done. Proxy address, there isn't any, hit done. Now it's testing a mirror, so you gotta wait until you see a message to pop up. And now we're ready to continue. Hit done again. Okay, so now we want to install, but I personally do not like using the LVM grouping. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncheck that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hit done. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hit done again. And now it's asking me, are you sure you want to do this? Because if you have any data, it's going to get wiped on this disk. In my case, I don't have anything, so I'm going to continue. And now it's asking for a name. So for the name, I'm going to give it my name, Sean. My server's name is going to be Ubuntu Server. And for the username, I'm going to give it administrator. For the password, put in your super secure password. All right, once that's filled out, hit done. And then do you want Ubuntu Pro? I don't, so I'm going to skip that and hit continue. Install Open SSH server. I am going to allow that option. I really like to SSH into my virtual machines. Hit done. I do not want any additional packages. I'm going to go ahead and hit done. And that's it. Now our Ubuntu is getting installed. All right, looks like our Ubuntu install has completed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reboot. So reboot, and it might throw an error here, failed to unmount. And if you're stuck there, just do Control-C a couple of times and the system should reboot. This only happens once when you install Ubuntu for some reason. Okay, now that we're back at the login screen, I'm going to go ahead and log in. All right, now that I'm logged in, Ubuntu Server is a command line interface, but you can quickly overcome that by installing GNOME. GNOME is kind of like a Windows GUI type interface that you could, interact and, basically use your Linux server with a GUI. So to do that, first thing I'm going to do is update the repo. So the command for that is sudo apt update. It's going to ask me for a password. So I'm going to put in my password. So right now we just updated our repositories to get the latest version of things. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. So next I'm going to do sudo apt upgrade. And then we're just going to update our Ubuntu to the latest. So it's going to download all the latest packages since it has been released. And then, that should take no more than a few minutes. Okay, now that has been done, I'm going to clear everything because I like a clean interface. So now I'm going to install the GNOME interface. So sudo apt install GNOME, GNOME, and hit enter, and then say yes. And it may take a few minutes to get that installed, and once it's installed, we'll come back. Okay, now that we have our GNOME interface installed, I'm going to install one more thing called XRDP. So sudo apt install XRDP. And then what that does, it allows me to use Windows Remote Desktop to remote into a Linux virtual machine, essentially. All right, once both GNOME and XRDP are done, I'm going to go ahead and reboot. So sudo reboot. And once this device reboots, we should come back with the graphical user interface like this. So now I can actually log in. And now I'm presented with the graphical user interface. It just looks like Windows or Mac OS. So everything is very similar. So I got a bunch of apps. I got, File Explorer, stuff like that. So I have the whole 9 yards. So now we are ready to do the next thing, which is to remote in. So I like to remote in because from here, it's hard to pass URLs, copy stuff over. With remote desktop, I can seamlessly work with my host machine and my virtual machine. So to do that, I'm going to open up my remote desktop and then hit plus. And then I'm going to click on add PC. And then I'm going to add the IP address for this Linux machine. So 10.0.0.8. And then it's just say, user account ask when required for now. Hit add. And then I'm going to go ahead and remote into it right here and hit connect. The username was administrator, and then the password, connect. Now, so it's not letting me remote in because I am already logged into Ubuntu through my console in Proxmox. What I have to do is first go ahead and log out of here, and then I should be able to remote in through my remote desktop. So remember that. So we're going to try again to remote in, and there we go. We are now remoted into our Linux virtual machine with a graphical user interface. So that we have our Ubuntu server installed. Next thing I want to run here is Docker containers. And the reason I'm going to use that so that I can quickly deploy apps. It makes life so much easier when using Docker. In the beginning, I was skeptical. I did not like Docker, but since I started using Docker Compose, it's so much easier to configure and quickly spin up Docker containers within minutes. All right, I'm not going to bore you with installing Docker because it's a very long process. This video might run up to like over an hour if I do go that route. So installing Docker is a very long process, and due to sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and link the instructions that I use to install Docker onto my Proxmox Ubuntu virtual machine. So do check that in the description below. But it's a very simple and straightforward process that you should be able to quickly deploy onto your own home lab. So once I have my Docker installed, I'm going to go ahead and create my first Docker app, which is going to be called Glance. All right, now that I have my Docker up and running, I'm going to go ahead and deploy my first container. Now I'm going to be using Glance as an example, and I'm only going to show you this once. So the process is going to be exactly the same for any Docker application that you want to deploy using Docker Compose. So let's get into it. So now you can see I have Docker running and my Docker desktop is clean and blank. So to deploy our first container, we're going to go ahead and open up terminal, and then I'm going to make a new folder in my home drive. So first I'm going to list my home drive. So these are the folders I have currently in there, and I'm going to make a new folder called Glance, since that's the application I'm deploying. And then I'm going to cd into Glance, and then I'm going to create a Docker Compose file. So to do that, it's going to be I'm going to be using nano docker-compose.yml. It's a YAML file. And then in here, I'm going to go ahead and go to my DocMost help guide, and I'm going to copy the command. All right, I'm going to come in and paste it here and save by using Control S and exit this by using Control X. All right, now that we have that, we're not done yet. I also have to create my .env file so that, my secret token is applied to my Glance container. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Okay. Once it has been pasted, I'm going to again save by doing Control S and exit by doing Control X. All right, now we should be able to spin up our container. So to do that, let me go ahead and clear this out and run docker compose upd and hit enter. And there we go. It's duplicating. And there we go. Just like that, we have our Docker container up and running. And just to show you what Glance does, I have configured my Glance this way. So more on that later in this video, but that's the simple and straightforward process for spinning up Docker containers using Docker Compose. Inside Docker, I am setting up Glance, which is my Homelab dashboard, and I cannot tell you that how useful this thing is. What makes this dashboard so amazing is that it's very simple to configure. I can configure everything simply using a YAML file, and just like that, I have a complete overview of every service that I'm running. And not only that, and if something goes down, I know exactly what went down. I can fix it right away. Plus, when I click on the services, it takes me straight to it. No more guessing or remembering URLs. So I'm mainly using this as my bookmark. For example, if my SQL Server service stopped working, I can immediately see that it turns red, giving me an error and letting me know that my service is down and I need to bring it up. But that's not all. I've also added my favorite tech YouTube channels, financial updates, and other entertainment videos. I even have news and Reddit feeds, one of my top favorite Reddits up here. The customization options are endless, and that's what makes Glance so powerful and yet so simple to configure. The other Docker container I'm running is DocMost. DocMost is a free open source replacement for Notion minus the subscription fees and cloud dependencies, so all your data stays private and local on your Homelab. It has features like real-time collaboration, diagram support, and version history. And in DocMost, I have all of my video scripts and all of my help guides that I'm using to maintain my home servers. And that's pretty much it on running Docker containers or spinning up new Docker containers using Docker Compose. And you can spin up whatever Docker container that's available out there easily just by following the same instructions or same steps. Granted that some might require some more configuration, but 90% of the time, this is the process. All right, now it's time to spin up our NAS server. So for that, what I'm using is a storage by a company called SendMate. In here, I've added two 4 terabyte SSDs, hard drives that are gonna be running in a mirror. So basically, the data is gonna be copied onto both drives in case one were to fail. We'll have a data on the secondary backup. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in and boot it up, and this should automatically start showing up in our Proxmox disk space. And one thing to note, so by default, this comes with many different modes like normal, JBOD, RAID 0, and RAID 1. In my previous video, I showed you how to use this in RAID 1, and that works great if you're using like Casa OS or Zima OS. But since we're going to be using TrueNas Scale, it does not like hardware RAID. So we're going to put this back in normal mode and create a software RAID when we're installing TrueNas Scale. Okay, so now I've plugged my hard drive enclosure into my MiniSForum PC. Now if I go under disks and see if it pops up or not, I can do reload. So what I'm gonna have to do is reboot my virtual machine so that this pops over. Okay, once I'm rebooted, now I can see that my external drive is showing up. So this and this is my external drive. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is click on wipe disk and say yes, because I wanna format this and then start from scratch. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the other disk, wipe it, yes I do. And then I'm gonna do initialize with GPT and do the same thing for the other drive. Okay, so now our drives have been added to the Proxmox. It's been formatted, it's ready to go essentially for our TrueNas Scale. So next, we're gonna go ahead and create our TrueNas virtual machine. So at this point, like I showed you earlier, download the ISO and upload it to your Proxmox server. So I already went ahead and did that. So now I'm gonna create a virtual machine and then call this TrueNas, okay? For the OS, I'm going to choose the TrueNas image, and then I'm gonna click next. Leave everything else default. For disks, for the boot drive, I am fine with 32 gigabytes. Maybe I'll give it 40 gigabytes since I may deploy some Docker containers on TrueNas, which you can do, by the way. All right, hit next. I want to give it about maybe 6 cores. And the type I want to choose is host. And then for the RAM, I'm going to give it about 16 gigabytes, so or actually 12 gigabytes. 12288. That should equal 12 gigabytes. Hit next, and I'm not going to change anything on the network. All right, now I have created the virtual machine, and I'm going to come in here and start it up. And essentially what we're going to do is install TrueNas. Okay, I'm going to do start TrueNas installation, and then the very first option is going to be install and upgrade, so that's what I'm going to choose. And I'm going to choose my hard drive, which is the 40 gigabyte OS drive. So I'm going to choose that by pressing the space bar, and then I'm gonna hit OK. And then this says it's gonna erase everything, so I don't have anything in there, so I'm gonna say yes. And then administrative user, I want to configure that, and then I want to put in my super secure password, and then hit OK, and then allow you EFI boot. That's fine, and that's it. So all right, so the installation has started. Depending on your specifications, it may take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes to install TrueNas. All right, now that we have our TrueNas Scale installed, next thing I want to do is add some hard drives to my TrueNas virtual machine so that I can create a pool and basically create my home NAS. To do that, it's not a simple GUI based process. You have to use command line, and we have to make sure that we add our hard drives using a serial number rather than the path. Otherwise, next time the drive reboots or the server reboots, the order might get shuffled and might crash our NAS. So it's a very simple and straightforward process, so just follow along and we should be able to create our home NAS using this. Now, to actually do this, the first thing I'm going to do is click on PVE, that's my Proxmox instance, and then click on shell. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull up my instructions. So the very first thing I'm going to do is list all of my drives by ID. And the command for that is ls dev disk by ID, and then press enter. And then now it's listed all of my drives that are currently part of my Proxmox instance. So what I'm looking for is ATA, which is mainly all the SATA drives that are connected through the SATA ports. And then in this case, my first one is the Kingston. So that's the 480 gigabyte SSD, which is using the SATA port. And then the other two are the Western Digital 4 terabyte mechanical hard drives. So these two are the ones that I want to add or pass through onto my TrueNas Scale virtual machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy my serial number and then paste that into my notes. It's going to come in very handy. And then I'm going to go ahead and run the command for passing through these drives. And the command for that is qmset, and then the 103 is basically my Proxmox virtual machine number. So if my TrueNas was 101, then I would have used 101, but in my case it's 103, so I'm using 103. So by default, the command is qmset, the virtual machine number, the SCSI, and the rest is the same command. So basically the key things that will get added or changed is adding in the serial number. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and add the serial number at the end. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and run this command onto my Proxmox instance. Go ahead and clear things up and then paste it, and then paste it in my Proxmox terminal. And then I'm going to press enter. Okay, and then now I got a confirmation update VM103 that it has worked. So I'm going to go ahead and run the other one as well. And hit enter. And again, I got confirmation. To confirm it further, I can go back to my Proxmox and then go to my TrueNas and then click on hardware. And then I can see that 2 drives have been added. Now, the most important part is that you make sure that you use that serial number, because every time you reboot your virtual machine or Proxmox, the boot order could shuffle or shift. So having a serial number will always guarantee that the drive mounts in the correct spot every single time. Okay, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is reboot my Proxmox server and then wait until it comes back up. And now we should be able to configure our Proxmox and create our home NAS. Okay, now that we have passed through our drives, I'm gonna go ahead and reboot my Proxmox server and then log back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and log in as normal. And then now we're gonna go ahead and create our first storage. So I'm gonna click on storage and then create a pool. And then I'm gonna give it a name. So this is gonna be called Home NAS, and do next. And then the layout is going to be, since we only have 2 drives, I'm going to be choosing mirror. But if you had 3 drives, you could do RAID Z1. If you had 4 drives, RAID Z2, and so on and so on. But to keep it simple, I'm using a mirror. Basically, I have 2 drives. If one were to fail, I should have a copy of that data on the other drive. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then it's asking for the disk size. So it's automatically selected because it already understands what we have. Everything else will be the same. I'm not going to go through each of the options because I'm not configuring those. So I'm going to go ahead and save and go to review. All right, so in the end, we have one mirror, which has 2 drives, which is 3.64 terabytes, and we're ready to create the pool. And then contents will be erased. So if you have any sensitive or important data, remember to back that up out of those disks. I don't, so I'm going to confirm that. And then just like that, our pool will be created. All right, so now our pool is ready and everything looks good. Next, what I'm going to do is create a user account. So go to credentials, users, and then I'm going to create a new user and then call it my name, Sean A, and give it a password. Okay. And the most important thing here is to go ahead and create a directory. So I'm going to click on Home NAS and create a data set. And this is going to be called, I guess, NAS drive. Okay. I'm going to hit create. And we want to make sure that this user has read, write, and execute permissions. Or if you're trying to configure this, let's say you're giving this to someone with only read-only access, so you can uncheck write and execute. But in my case, I'm the only user, so I want full control on this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And it says this is blah, blah, blah. Everything will be erased. I'm fine with that. Continue. All right, now we have our user created. Now we can go to share and share this. So I'm going to be using Windows SMB shares. This works with any Ubuntu, Mac OS, iPhones, iPads, and Windows. So this option works with all of the above. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add. And then I'm going to navigate down to the NAS drive path that I created earlier. And then I'm going to hit save. And it's asking me to configure ACL. Sure, I'll go ahead and do that. And then it's asking me to start the SMB service. Of course, I want to start that up. And now we're in here. So all I want to make sure is that this user group, Sean A, has read, write, and execute privileges. And all I have to do is save access control list. And that's it. Now our NAS has been created and it's on our home network. And to test it, we can go ahead and do that real quick. All right, so to test it, I'm going to do Command K, and this brings our connect to server option. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the server address. In my case, is 10.0.0.17 and hit connect. All right, so now it's asking for a name. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my user that I created earlier. And then for the password, my password, there we go. Our NAS drive is mounted. And now I can test by just, moving certain files over. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over. And I'm on Wi-Fi, so it may take a few minutes to copy those files over. But overall, our NAS is up and running and working properly. All right, now I'm remoted onto my Windows workstation. I'm going to go ahead and mount my new NAS on here. So to do that in Windows, all I got to do is // the IP address 10.0.0.17 and one more / and hit enter. Now it's asking me for credentials. So I'm going to put in my username and the password and hit enter. And there we go. I am connected. And as you can see, the folder that I uploaded earlier from my MacBook Pro is now showing up here. It's got a bunch of pictures and videos that I have that I want to, store on my NAS drive. And then just like that, I can, move data folders over and I can quickly drag data across my home network easily between different machines and whatnot. So having a NAS is a really game changer if you haven't set one up already. As for power consumption at idle, this mini PC is averaging around 15 to 18 watts. And under load, it's around 27 to 28 watts. So not that efficient, but not that power hungry either. It's a very good balance of power to performance, I think. So the big question, Is the MiniSForum UN1250 a perfect home server? Well, not quite, but it handles most tasks very efficiently. It's got plenty of CPU power and I can easily run multiple virtual machines, Docker containers, and even a full-blown SQL server without any issues. For a mini PC, it's surprisingly capable. Where it falls short is the storage department. You only get one NVMe slot and one SATA port, which limits your internal storage options and reduces your redundancy. If you need a high-speed storage or a lot of capacity, then look somewhere else. This device might not be for you. But for me personally, for the price, I think I'm going to be using this as my home server until something better comes along. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. I know this was pretty long and it did take a lot of time to make this video, and thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that bell icon for updates. And I'll see you in my next video, hopefully a shorter one.